when we kind of look at what does living look like, it means that every day we need to learn to commit. That's correct. When is this going to be automatic? How about like never?
Hello and welcome to the Thrive State Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. V, triple board certified MD and performance and longevity expert. I don't know why, I just felt like saying that with a swag, but welcome in. I've got a great episode for you today because I interview an Olympian who teaches and coaches some of the world elite performers, champions, and celebrities. And you'll be shocked to find out what he teaches them for them to be able to get that edge to perform at that championship Olympic level. Now, before we get into the podcast, let me welcome all the newcomers for coming in. Thank you for discovering the show. I am truly honored that you have chosen the Thrive State Podcast to be your guide in achieving more health, more happiness, more human potential. This is really a space that I am honored to have where I am able to connect with world thought leaders, experts in health, longevity, biohacking, the best to be able to get you into what I call the Thrive State, which is really an energetic state, a bioenergetic state that pulses through our body that not only signals every single one of our cells on how to behave, but other people feel it too. And if you start to understand how we are all connected to each other, this Thrive State is really a transformational way of approaching life, of approaching how human beings can become a better version of itself as we progress through the globe together. If you're returning to the podcast, let me thank you for just being such a loyal listener. If you haven't done so already, you can help the show grow by subscribing to the podcast, engaging with our content with comments, leaving a 5-star review wherever podcasts are heard, and then also sharing this episode with your friends and family members. And as my free gift to you, I have 2 resources that you can get online that will help you achieve your Thrive State. Number 1 is a Thrive State toolkit. You can find this toolkit, which is actually all the worksheets, journal prompts, diagrams from my Thrive State Accelerator course, which you can find at mythrivestate.com/toolkit. This is going to teach you all the habits for you to get into your Thrive State, delivered to you absolutely free for helping this podcast grow. The other thing is, if you go to thrivestatestarter.com, there's a bundle of resources that include breathwork exercises, a free ebook on how to thrive to 105, resources for my book, Thrive State, as well as lecture notes, all the key diagrams, all the key frameworks that I deliver in my keynote that I deliver all around the world, all given to you at thrivestatestarter.com. Thank you so much for allowing this show to grow. Those are my gifts to you for just being immensely grateful for your participation in allowing the show to grow. Now on to today's show. Today's show was actually recorded in a small mastermind group that is called the Bucket List Mastermind. And that's really taking the idea that creating a bucket list and starting to work towards it makes us feel more alive. And in doing so, we can actually increase health, longevity, and performance. And who better to interview in our mastermind list than an Olympic medalist who knows what it takes to actually achieve and become a champion at the highest level. And what I have to say is I was shocked by his answer. I was shocked that this is a way that people actually allow genius to come through them. So listen to this podcast because, look, we all want to become better in life. We all want to be able to achieve the best in life. But sometimes it's not about chasing. It's about doing this thing that you hear on this episode here. He was someone who dreamt of being in the Olympics as a child and actually achieved that goal, as well as become an Olympic champion, now teaching all these tools and techniques to other Olympians, other world champions. So he really has it dialed in. And what I have to say is, what I thought would be the recipe for success is very counterintuitive. So you want to listen to this podcast, please enjoy this conversation with myself and Dr. Jeff Spencer.
Dr. Jeff Spencer, welcome to a special edition of the Thrive State Podcast. This is the Bucket List Challenge. So great to have you here, brother.
Well, good, man. Well, the bucket list, that's great. Sounds like the lightning round where questions come fast and furious. My kind of place, so it's perfect.
Well, I am going to go ahead and introduce you to our group that's here. And then we will also reintroduce you on the podcast, what I'll do separately. But today I have the distinct privilege of hosting this gentleman here, Dr. Jeff Spencer, a renowned tournament and coach to some of the world's most elite performers, with a storied career that began in his youth, committed to becoming an Olympic cyclist, a dream he realized at just 21. Dr. Spencer went on to create a deep understanding of peak performance and helping others reach their highest potential. He has coached champions in sports. He's been a trusted advisor to industry leaders, billionaires, icons of success, including Richard Branson, Tiger Woods. He's the author of several impactful books and the creator of the DARE coaching model, which has revolutionized the way high achievers approach their ambitions and overcome their challenges. Today, he's going to share some insights about his journey, his principles in peak performance. Dr. Jeff Spencer, welcome to the Thrive State Podcast.
Well, ready to thrive. Let's do it.
So we're having you on a conversation, and this is a special series where we take some people through a bucket list challenge, because it is a premise that a bucket list can be used as a tool for us to remember our purpose and potential. As you start to lay out your goals and start to take action on each one of your goals, you maybe start to see what resonates with you the most, and it actually might bring you back to purpose. And what we've discovered in the field of longevity medicine is that purpose actually allows people to live longer lives than people who don't. So this is actually a longevity tool. But the reason I brought you on is the following. So many people come up with a bucket list. So many people come up with New Year's resolutions, but they don't follow through on them. And we know what it takes to be an Olympian at this one. So before we start getting into more of the practical takeaways that everyday people can take, can you talk to us a little bit about what it was like as a child to have a goal and ambition to become an Olympic cyclist?
Well, I don't know. I know I've always had the self-start gene. I've never needed any motivation from anybody to do anything. So I think that's probably a product of my parents, because they never suggested that I do anything. They never told me I couldn't. So I guess I figured that, well, maybe it's up to me to figure out what that is for myself. And so I felt like the Olympics chose me because there was an inclination to, there was a natural gravity between me and it when I was 7. I didn't know how I was going to do it. And then when I was 11, I was asked by a competitive group of cyclists to go on a bike ride with them. So I hustled up a bike, and at the end of that 25 miles, my same age counterparts were dead, and I was fresh as a daisy. So I figured, well, maybe cycling has chosen me to be the vehicle by which I would become an Olympian. So there's a really key point here is that, number one, that didn't start off as being a goal for me. It was a calling that I answered. And because it was a calling that I answered, it didn't take a lot of energy to show up every day and do the training necessary to do that. It took me obviously 10 years to make it happen, but there was no guarantee that it was going to happen. So what I found from that is that when people ask me, well, what are your dreams? I say, well, I don't really have any. It's like I show up in receivership, and when I am called to do something, and I know how my truth speaks to me when I show up and I pursue that calling, then it takes a lot less effort to get to where I'm called to get to, because it doesn't require the struggle, the energy allocation that it usually does when our will is what's propelling us forward. So that was kind of the initial impulse, and it gave me an insight into how life works best for me. It's receivership and calling, not goal and hard work and killing myself. I just found that there was a different way, and so I hope that provides some level of insight. The idea of becoming an Olympian never occurred to me, because the goal was not to become an Olympian. The goal was to explore the possibility of what my capacity as a cyclist was. And the Olympics was the result of that. But I always kept my eye on the doing part of it, not the outcome is necessarily the carrot. If I hope that conveys well.
It does convey very well. And I hear this of some champions, some pinnacle in their fields. A lot of people feel that they've got this, burning desire or something that just came so naturally to them.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times it felt effortless to be able to put in what other people consider as strict discipline. So I have to ask you, Jeff, this ability to receive, the ability to have that innate desire, do you think only a certain amount of people have it in the world, or do you think everybody's sort of blessed with these natural gifts and they have to be able to tune into that receivership?
Well, everybody is born, there's only one of us in all of creation, no matter how we slice the pie, which means that we bring something unique to humanity that only we can bring to it. It's a matter of discovering that. And so in my opinion, if we look at how we're hardwired biologically, we have basically two mentalities that are competing for control over our decision-making.
Mm-hmm.
We have our fear-based survival instincts. There's no dispute about that. Science is very clear about the fight or flight mechanism. That's a mechanism built within us to protect us psychologically and physically from harm. And it's faster than we can actually think, because the difference between life and death in critical situations is faster than we can think in a split second. And because of that, it gets first dibs at every moment of our life. It's our first decision maker is safety, is what it is. But living a life of safety doesn't mean that you're going to live a life of full potential, because living a life of safety isn't about potential and it doesn't care about gold medals. It only cares about survival. So if we're stuck on that mentality, because we believe the story that it tells us, then we're never going to, again, live a life of the potential that is that is innately hardwired into every one of us. So we also have another sort of biological entity here, which is seeking. If we look at what science says is the highest instinct that we as humans have biologically, again, put into us innately, it's seeking. Well, that's interesting. It's not procreation and it's not shelter, it's not food, it's seeking. And like Maslow's hierarchy. So we have this profound urge and drive within us to be able to seek and create a life of value and contribution, which, if we're aligned with that, allows us to live exponentially at our full potential. So you can kind of see that to play at our full potential, if we're directed through our survival instincts and impulses that drive us, we can't get to the higher ground of our potential. We have to extract ourselves from that natural tendency to live in receivership, which is unnatural, but it's a choice that we can make to be in receivership. And we've all had those moments of receivership where we, with our mind, body, heart, soul, and spirit, we become receptive for insights and revelations to show up in our consciousness. And so in that act of receivership, where we're not actively pursuing, looking under every rock, trying to find a solution to move forward like most people do. Most people are told, keep your eye on the ball, work harder than anybody else, don't sleep, do this, do that. It's an exhaustive process that may not provide anything of value, but in receivership, everything that kind of shows up gets a look. So you could be gifted for free the insight that creates resonant recognition between it and the possibility. And in my experience, when we identify that alignment and that natural gravity and attraction to that which showed up in our consciousness as a possibility, that's what I mean by receivership. And when that shows up, in my opinion, it always leads to a bigger, better, faster than trying to do it the traditional way of basically work hard, never take your eye off the ball, believe, hope, try harder, want it bad enough. I mean, all of those things, I think, in my experience, just create massive frustration.
I didn't recognize or I didn't realize that this conversation was actually going to go this way, but this is beautiful. because in many ways, my audience understands the neuroscience understands a part of the brain called the default mode network. This part of our brain, our autopilot survival mode of the brain that takes on thoughts, ideas, values, worldviews without us even being able to be conscious of it. And you're right, it's fear and survival based. And what we understand when people tap into flow states of states where they're performing at their best, they've noted that this default mode network needs to be quieted down in order for that to happen. And so the neuroscience is starting to catch up. Now, you mentioned receivership, and I'm somebody that has done a little bit of spiritual work and trying to uncover and continue to seek to understand who I am beyond this meat suit. So I might have some understanding. For the lay person, hearing the word receivership might feel odd. What exactly does receivership mean? Are you saying there's a state that's beyond my head where I'm just deeply connected to something bigger? If you could just describe that to maybe, I don't know, a 15-year-old who knows nothing about spirituality, number one, how would you describe it? And then number two, I could probably tell you that most of the world isn't in a state of reception. They're in a state of problem solving from here. So how do we learn to cultivate more receivership in our own lives?
Well, as I mentioned, receivership is not a natural state. Our natural state is to be inside our head, trying to control every variable to safely get to where we want to go. And I'm saying that is possible, but it takes a lot of time and a lot of energy. And there's a lot of false starts that happen in pursuit of that. We just need to look around at our own lives and the lives of others to know that that's true. I guess the other question is, do we really come up with our own ideas? Or do our ideas show up in our head and we, the conscious being, then can select them? So to me, receivership, it's again a state of being where we open up our mind, body, hearts, souls, and spirits deliberately. Like I would be here sitting myself, and I would be diaphragmatically breathing to slow down my breathing. So I'm not trying to chase an idea, but I'm staying in receivership to let a possibility find its way into my consciousness. So for example, in the morning, when you're in the bathroom getting ready for the day, sometimes that's where your best ideas show up. That you didn't give those ideas to yourself. They just showed up, and so the bigger ideas that really matter, they show up when we're not trying so hard to find it. When we're trying to find it, that would be like an iterative, creative activity for a very specific thing, but it's not the big idea. The big idea that changes lives, that allows us to connect with our potentials, always happen in this state where we extract ourselves from intellectually trying to pursue and find something. We remain in receivership of it. And people will notice that when they do that, like again in the morning when you're in the bathroom, ideas show up. If we make that part of our daily activity, or better yet, continuously remain in receivership while we're doing the activities of daily living, then in my opinion, the possibilities of life, they always show up. They always do in perfect timing. So I hope that provides another side to this. It's not a natural state. It's a state that's applied. A series of things are applied to be in that state to then let the good stuff show up.
That is something that I think people on this bucket list conversation could really appreciate. One of the tenets of a bucket list challenge is sometimes you are so used to living the life somebody else has designed for you because your brain has suggested that you survive by making people happy, having a certain amount in your bank account, a job, and you have all these rules of the things that you might need to do. But in doing so, you have lost touch with yourself, of your true self, your authenticity, what naturally wants to flow through you. And in doing a bucket list, I encourage people to tap into states that inspire them, that makes them feel alive. What are the thoughts in their mind that put them in those energetic states, and have them there too. And in the process of going through and crossing things off your bucket list, you'll find that there's certain things that you cross off that just like, okay, I did it. That was an extra 10K a month. Okay, fine. But there might be some things where like you're connecting with somebody doing this one activity and it just inspires you. It just makes you feel connected, makes you feel alive. And it's following that emotion that actually will lead you to kind of remember the things that can cultivate this positive energy. When you find yourself in states of receivership, how would you describe maybe some of the emotional states or what you're going through as you are one in receivership? And what did these actions look like or feel like when you're taking the actions in flow or receivership?
In receivership, it's quite different. It's where you know because you know. That's different than doing a pro and con list or seeking the counsel of people that have more experience. It's a different thing. Yeah. I think we've all had those moments. We know because we know. You don't need to go look in a book.
Yeah.
You already know what to do because it's been gifted to you, and there's this resonant capacity of confidence and certainty that comes from it. And that's one of the elements that informs us that it would be a good time to be able to engage this, or maybe it's something that maybe it's not the right time to do it, but we can park it in the garage for later. And so I found that, again, that's a state where tremendous energy is conserved. It's not burned up. I mean, if the brain is 2% the body's mass and it consumes 20% of the body's energy, and you're using your brain for everything, well, that's a lot. You add 20% of your body's energy goes to digest it. Now 40% of your energy is taken in those two biologies. And so if we kind of pull back a little bit and, recognize that this is a free gift that's put in there and we observe it, but then we need to learn to trust the relationship that is formed through that level of resonant recognition, because you know it to be true because it's true. I think that's all you kind of need to know. But, our survival side, wants more proof, generally speaking. But when we learn to identify with the presence of knowing and that being enough, it doesn't carry a big emotion to it, quite honestly. Big emotions and things like that are often associated with, I'm filling a void, and it doesn't work like that, quite honestly. If it's tranquil and you know it because you know it, then that's generally the signal that you've got the right thing.
Of all the people that you've coached, it seems like to me there's this intuitive sense, and I wonder how you developed it for yourself. And as you're coaching other people, where would you say they fall in terms of understanding this concept? And what do you do? Because I would probably say the majority of people don't quite understand it, because you've got that human part of your mindset is, how do you know? How do you know it's right? How do you know you're on your path? Are there certain things that you're doing with your clients to allow them to understand this aspect?
Well, there's always a body of evidence that you can look at that can confirm that it's the right thing at the right time. And so for me, when you look at the body of evidence, because you know a person's history and you know what their assets are, I call that a state of readiness. For me, the most important thing that I need to know and anybody should know about themselves is their state of readiness. Most people think it's the goal. Well, yeah, the goal is one thing, but that's always subject to change, because a couple things here is that in receivership, you may choose the goal, but in pursuit of the goal, there may be a tweak in the path to get from where you are to where you want to get to that actually provides an opportunity to get to something bigger, better than you could have possibly have conceived of. And simultaneously within that, I mean, the goals that we have and the plans that we have to get to our goals, quite honestly, they're best estimations of what we believe to be true about how we get from where we are to where we want to get to. It's not reality yet. So, the plan, when it's executed, then it meets life in real time. And the context of life then sort of dictates the choices that we make to be able to move forward. So the idea of ongoing adjustment of plan moving forward to goal that could also be evolving is like another side of that we always need to be constantly mindful of, because the prolific achievers, they're always looking for twists and turns that are presented and processed that lead to a bigger, better outcome that they could never have conceived of before. So it's, if you have a goal and you only devote yourself to the goal, you no longer become a creator. You're just a technician, doing the action steps to get from where you are to necessarily where you want to get to. So, the idea, again, with the people that play the big game, they certainly understand, as I said earlier, that you do your pro and con list, you do your homework, you get the intellectual evaluation processes of the merits of something that has to be done, of course. But then on the other side of that, it's a complementary to it, is that there's the general impression that one has for taking action. And if you look at anybody that plays a really big game, they're going to tell you that they play by instincts. I didn't say by emotions, I said by instincts, because they know they're disciplined so well that there could be a pattern recognition in the moment, turn right, turn left. All the reasons don't need to be known, but the pattern recognition, because of their familiarity with the terrain, allows them to do this, and they've learned to trust themselves over time. Because what we're doing, we're asking ourselves to do exactly the opposite of what the brain may be suggesting. So, again, it's a skill that we learn over time. I always suggest that people learn the skill in safe ways where the aspirations are appropriate with reach. They're not too big, too fast, that allow them to start to gain confidence in, do you really trust what you're seeing? And what you're being informed of is probably a better language for that. And as you learn how your truth speaks to you, again, you know because you know. And again, it's knowing in a quiet sense. It's not like a giant revelation. It's not like huge emotional discharge. It's not like that. There's just a certain confidence that you know to be true. It's almost you win before you even start, because you kind of know why you're taking action on a certain something.
Where do you think, as human beings, we've lost touch with this innate ability to just know and flow?
And I don't think that.
Well, I don't think the majority of people live life that way. So my question to you is, why is that the case?
Yeah, I don't think that's our innate state. I think our innate state is to make our decisions out of our fear-based survival impulses, because safety rules. And the fight or flight mechanism happens faster than we can think. I can give you a couple examples. It's like, you're in an intersection and a guy runs a red light. Somehow you know how to turn away from, having that T-bone crash that, kills everybody. That happened. You couldn't think that fast, but yet something there that was listening that made that happen. It happens too often to be a mistake. There has to be an advocate there somewhere. And it's the same thing psychologically. It's like, has anybody ever said anything to you and you recoiled back at them as faster than you could think? How did it turn out? Turn out well or not so good? Well, she was generally good. I wish I could take it back, right? Yeah. So again, these survival mechanisms are really our first impulse against an action. And we're all told what? Well, go with your gut, go with your first impulse. Well, I'm not so sure about that, quite honestly, because if it's driven by survival, it isn't going to turn out well. So again, I think if we see that the survival instinct, it is our natural state of being. But I like the idea of being supernatural, not natural. So the supernatural side is where we don't take action too quick. We always pause. We show restraint. We show restraint on our action. And if it checks out as being a receivership, and we know it to be true because we have that relationship with it, then we take action, because that always delivers its promise, should I say. And that may be just moving forward, towards the bigger goal or whatever. But the amount of energy that's conserved from that position, but again, it's not natural. We have to learn to trust that. And most people say, well, yeah, that's just me. I'm just the person that reacts to everything. I'm impulsive. That's just me. Well, it's a biologic side to you. Yeah. But the real you is the one that shows restraint against it and is able to take and do actions that are consistent with what you know to be true, to take you towards the aspirations that in this context have been gifted for us to see as something that we should be pursuing. We can call that a goal as well.
Again, it really seems like to me a life of flow, a life where energetically you're just riding what's given to you, and all you have to do is just not resist it to be able to fully reach your potential. Yeah.
Well, that's true. But people will say, well, that's not true, because it's like, just imagine how good you could be if you really cared about it and really put effort into this and you were really committed. I can't believe that you're wasting all this time in receivership when you could be advancing yourself, getting to somewhere. And that's kind of the mantra. And we would expect that, because your human nature would absolutely endorse that, because that's the biologic basis for it. So naturally, that feels natural. But again, if we want to go supernatural on this, we have to demonstrate restraint against the impulses that come naturally to us. They can't deliver because they're fear-based. And you can't get to bigger through that. It's not a motivation. It's not a prescription. And I can tell you universally, Kien, that the biggest impact on my clients is learning to be in receivership. This is the biggest thing that they all tell me. I'm just reporting what the observation is to it. Being in receipt, where you're not impulsively chasing everything out of fear that you're going to get left behind. And if I don't get there, I'm never going to get there. Somebody's going to take my idea from me. A lot of this is just fear-based, And so if we talk, it's not flow, that's anti-flow, that's resistance, that's energy consumption, and to learn to pull ourselves away from that. I've said this several times so far, but I can't restate it enough, is that that's our natural state. Our supernatural state is to be calm and be trusting in perhaps not knowing exactly what to do right now. But the kind of champion side, if you don't know what to do, you don't do anything, or you play soft offense. You don't make any decisions until it shows up. It's very counter to the way most people think about it. But yet it has been the way that, in the experience of what my clients tell me, and I know this for a fact myself, that the receivership side to it is the catalyst for flow, quite honestly. Because you're not bringing your will to this. Like, you're not commanding what you want to manifest in life. You're standing in receivership to have something be presented to you that can be something so significantly bigger than you could ever have conceived of, that ends up being our biggest, perhaps, contribution to humanity, is accessible through that. Like, Einstein, he didn't decide to create the theory of relativity. It popped into his head. But I could tell you, it probably wasn't at a disco, It probably, again, when he was walking his dog or something, being boring, where it showed up. So again, another perspective on that has proven itself just to be true.
I hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. If you are, I just wanted to let you know, join our community. There's so many free resources and a great community of people that desire health, happiness, human potential, to have more in their life, more health, more energy. And when you have those two things together, you could create more happiness, more abundance, whether it be financial, romantic, all these things in your life. And if you're just starting out, you don't know where to go, just sign up for thrivestatestarter.com, because in there you're going to get a bundle of information that includes a longevity ebook, a longevity and performance resource guide, lecture notes that come from my keynotes at Google, at Fortune 500 companies, all the insights in that keynote in lecture slide form given to you. And then finally, breathwork. I share 3 powerful breathwork exercises to access calm, which really gives you clarity and peace during the day, to access energy if you need to wake up and really motivate yourself, and finally, a breathwork routine that you could do every single morning so that you could be very intentional with how you create that day. You can find all this stuff delivered free to your inbox at thrivestatestarter.com. And our community is growing. If you want to be a part of a community of people that desire the Thrive State, that are really in Thrive State themselves, and help other people along with that, you could be a part of the community. You can get group coaching from me. We do breathwork sessions, meditation sessions, and you also get to drop in and participate in podcasts in the future. You could find more about the community at mythrivestate.com. That's mythrivestate.com. So check out those resources. You're not going to be disappointed, and please enjoy the remainder of this podcast. So you had mentioned early morning in the shower, maybe with some intentional breathing is one way to maybe tap into that. For people who might be starting, are there any other practical things that somebody who this concept is super novel for them to be able to get a taste of, oh, I get that. I was able to get that for a second. Any suggestions there?
Yeah, well, sure. I would suggest that because again, that the impulses in the morning is to get up as quickly as possible and get going, get your coffee going, because you don't want to get left behind and you want to get some stuff done. You don't want anybody to get ahead of you. It's like being crazed. And so again, in the morning, I think it's a really good time to sit, and I'll share with you exactly what I do. So when I get up in the morning, one of the first things that, I do, and this is for me, is that, I do my prayers and kind of go through the checklist of things to acknowledge the blessing of a new day in front of me, and petitioning for insight to be able to find and say the words that speak to other people that represent my little slice of contribution to humanity. And then I do the diaphragmatic breathing, but the diaphragmatic breathing, which is where you're gently sitting and you're doing an inhale through the nostrils as if you're smelling a flower, like 4 seconds in, like gently smelling a flower. And then you hold that for 4 seconds and then you exhale. You could do it gently through the mouth, like you're kind of blowing out a little candle. 4 second exhalation. You repeat that breathing over and over again. And why that is important is that breath is the metronome for the mind. Herbert Benson knew that in the 70s. He wrote a book about it, groundbreaking book, that your blood chemistry changes within a minute of doing that slow diaphragmatic breathing. So if that's the metronome that slows the mind down, when the mind slows down, then the receptivity to the gift of insight and revelation is at maximum, works towards maximum. And so the idea that I do personally for this is I looked at this as like a trust ritual, where I'm not just doing this biologically to slow my breath down, but I'm consciously learning to put myself in a deep state of trust that the things that I should be mindful of for myself and that I should be inspired to take action on will be revealed to me. And so the diaphragmatic breathing, what that does, that removes any personal will that I have to get somewhere. Because a lot of times, quite honestly, if we're honest about it, the things that we want to make us feel safe, acknowledged. They're really fear-based because we feel like if I don't get them, I'm going to be left alone by myself. So it's not exactly what we think it is. And so I know for myself that every day I do it, it's like the first time. I don't feel like I'm getting any better at it every day because I'm going against my natural inclination to want to get up and start racing. And so when I apply the exercise of diaphragmatic breathing, that trust ritual, meaning that I am willing to forfeit my will and ambition at this moment in time to be a receivership, to have ideas show up that I couldn't conceive of, that I would build a life and a legacy based on. To me, it's like a trust ritual. And I found that works best for me. Nobody taught me that side of it. That's just something that I was reflecting on, that I want to be in such trust of the process, but I have to deliberately quiet and mute my biology to quiet the noise for that to be able to happen. And so I'll do that for maybe, 10 minutes, 12 minutes or so. And every day it's a struggle. It never gets any easier because it's not automatic. It's something that's applied every day. It's not a ritual that you do and then when you get better at it, while you do it, you're thinking about something else because your brain thinks that, well, I know what to do. I'll know what to do. I'll just sort of do this, but I really know what to do, so I don't really need to do it. And I found that that's not true because you have these opposing biologic forces that are hardwired into us that are fighting for control over our decision-making. You can either follow your impulses based on fear, or you can take the time to put yourself in receivership, to be able to be gifted with insight and become a seeker, where you're creating a life where, as Maslow said, you're becoming self-actualized. And, there's only one of us in all of creation. And that's where we can, provide the gift to humanity that only we can give through that state. If we're crazed and we're driven by herd instinct and we're driven by our fear-based impulses to try to get somewhere fast enough so we won't get left behind, it takes on a whole new dimension of possibility within us. Plus, it's anti-aging. It's anti-inflammation for the brain and the soul, quite honestly. And it's a battle. It never comes easy. Why isn't it easy? Everything in life isn't easy. Why doesn't it self-perpetuate? Because it doesn't. We live in a dimension where everything decays if time and energy aren't put into it. Like, when am I going to get there? Well, how about never? How about every time you do it, you get there and then it sort of wears off and you got to come back and do it again, So I think these are some of the realities of it that are all kind of part of how at least we need to be mindful of the process for it.
This is definitely very counterintuitive from conventional thinking of performance. And you work with people like Tiger Woods, who's been out there. He's got a lot of, accolades in the golf space, winning these things. Would you say then that in working with him, was winning the goal, or is it sort of discovering and uncovering who he is in the process, and the byproduct of that process just happened to be winning those medals?
Well, in this case, I'm going to just make a general statement about this, taken as a totality, is that, when you look at high achievers like this, if you ask any Olympian how they won the gold medal, here's what they tell you. I don't know. I just went out and executed my preparation, because the harder you try, just everybody think about what I'm going to say here for a second. The harder you try, does your performance get better or worse? It gets worse. When you really try and everything's on the line, you start to tighten up. It becomes too important. You have no flow. You just wonder, who am I? This person, this isn't me. Well, it kind of is you because it's happening within you, but it's the fear-based survival side. And so we can see right there that there's complete mythology about how all this happens. You look at all the athletes that are getting ready to perform, and what are they doing? They're doing breathing exercises. They're not, trying to read and study to get better. No, they want to get themselves out of the way so that their preparation can spontaneously produce the output. When Tiger's playing golf, I don't think that he's thinking. I think that he's perceiving where he is on the course. And with all of his senses, he's taking in the data on the wind, the temperature, where the ball is, the height of the grass, what club is he going to get, and he's not consciously thinking about this. He's perceiving, and he's determining what the single stroke should be without thinking about it. He's feeling it into existence, executing it without trying to control it too much with the brain. I know the brain is everything in people's minds, but the truth is I'm seeing you as you were a quarter of a second ago, because by the time the optic nerve is stimulated, it takes a quarter of a second for me to see. So I kind of seeing you as you were a quarter of a second ago. When my foot hits the ground, I'm aware of it consciously a half a second later. So, real time and perceived time are like two different things. And so with all the high performers, the way they do it is that technically they are freaking brilliant. They put in the freaking time. Like Picasso, he said, I spent a lifetime learning to paint as a child. And when you go and you look at his original works, that's almost like photorealism, because he logged the miles. He just didn't think himself to be Picasso. Like Einstein, he's a patent clerk in Bern, Switzerland, gave himself enough time to think his own thoughts without being institutionalized. And he came up with the possibility of theory of relativity. He didn't give himself that, but he had the space in his mind to receive that as a possibility. So again, when you master your discipline, the nuts and the bolts of it, because you've logged the miles, then at a certain point, you go from intellectual to pattern recognition is what happens. And you look at any of the great performers, and let's say musicians, they are reading effortlessly the music in front of them. They're not thinking. They are perceiving and responding with an intimate relationship with the process. More will doesn't create that. It's mastery of the technique first, because again, you've logged the miles. And then once you've logged the miles, then the artistic side can start to emerge where it becomes pattern recognition. Like in military jets, they have a voice that's connected to the electronics of the plane, and the voice will tell the pilot what to do. Yeah, well, the time it takes for the voice to talk and the pilot to understand and make the adjustment, the plane's already in the side of a mountain. So they turn it off. It's like, it's just driving me crazy. Too much input, too slow. And let me ask you this. So like if you look at the Olympics in practice, you see somebody does a quadruple something. And then what happens when they go to perform in the final? They fall. They can't even do a single thing because their body is turned to cement. No spontaneity. Why? Because they're trying to control every move intellectually, believing that the way that we produce our best performances is through an intellectual control of all the variables and assembling them in a way that leads to perfection. It's not like that. Yeah. It's about your level of preparation is what it is. And that's part of the mythology of the prolific achievers is that they have so much will. No, they don't. They have an idea that makes sense, that they recognize to be something that they see as possible. They start, and then they remain in receptivity. And as they work towards something, if something new comes up, then they follow the something new. It's like all the good stuff in life never is a first try thing. It's usually an accident from something else. That's kind of what it is. But to trust that, you're asking us to go against our primal biologic instinct of survival.
Let's talk a little about the preparations and the reps. What I'm hearing from you is, you get into a state of receptivity, and this is something you kind of just desire to do and to work and to chip at. Is it to say then that if you're not feeling inspired to do that, or if you're not receiving it, or if it feels hard to do, maybe somebody shouldn't be doing this? How does somebody, the mind plays lots of tricks in
that does
in the time that it takes, to do all these different reps. So, for somebody who's just starting, how do you know you are in the state of receptivity to allow you to do these reps? And how do you not talk yourself out of, oh, hey, you know what? I'm not feeling, inspired to exercise today because, my body's not telling me that. But to be able to put in those reps every single day, how do you suggest somebody, go through this process of discipline? Because I feel like discipline is one of these things that I think so many people lack.
When we look at the idea of repetitions and things like that, I mean, if there's a path forward that's proven itself to be true, well, if we want to get to where we want to get to, then you have to follow the path. And whatever you want the reality to be, you can't supersede what the reality really is. That's just the way it goes. But when we talk about people deciding on something, well, are they really consciously deciding, or is there survival impulse that's always listening that gets first dibs at every opportunity? I can't emphasize this enough, is that the primary lens that every opportunity and action goes through first is going to be survival. And if we perceive it to be a little bit too hard in our own mind, even though that it's not, if that's what we choose to believe, then you're done, you're toast. And also, if you believe that to be you, then you're done also. We have to say that it's a survival biology within us, but we do have another option. And that's to follow our instinct, and our highest instinct is seeker. Do you want to be a seeker, or you want to be a survivor? Those are the two biologic choices. And, we, the observer, can look at these two things operating in us simultaneously. And, we feel this day in and day out where we're ambivalent. We want to do this, but we want to do that. We want to do this, we want to do that. Well, that's the conflict between the two, trying to make us do what the one that has the most compelling reason to do will follow that day. And so I would just suggest for people that you be mindful that there are two mentalities that are working side by side, vying for our attention and our decision making. Do you want to follow your first impulse based on fear? Well, we know that that's not a recipe for success. Or do we want to resist that when we see it? And do we want to return to our seeking instinct to live a life of self-actualization, where we're playing at our potential that's evolving over time, and where we're providing a life of quality to ourselves, and we're adding some level of contribution to humanity simultaneously? We always have a choice. And the mystery between why some people want to do it, some people don't, that remains elusive to me. I don't know how you solve that problem. It has its own particular way of doing it. But here's what I also know, is that anything good in life, energy has to be consistently put into it, because we live in a universe, in a dimension that's really time, energy, and space. Those are like the defining characteristics of the dimension that we live in. And we do know that entropy, which is the tendency for things to decay over time if energy is not put into them. And if that's one of the primary tenets of the physics of the world that we live in, we can think whatever we want about that. But the truth is that anything good, energy needs to be put into it. And only we can self-generate that. We can't get that from anybody else. And it's up to us to decide where we're going to place our time and our energy and our effort. And so when we kind of look at what does living look like, it means that every day we need to learn to commit. That's correct. When is this going to be automatic? How about like never? So again, the idea of making a conscious commitment every day to decide, what? I'm not going to come from my survival instincts today. I want today to be the result and outcome of what I need to get done to demonstrate my restraint and my ability to apply the actions that move me towards manifesting my full potential. And as I tell my daughter, it's like we're here on this planet to provide a unique contribution that only we can give. There is no other us in all of humanity. And so where does that leave us? It means that we can be an example to others of how it's done. And if there's ever a time in humanity where we need living, breathing examples of what it takes to be able to create a life of value, it's now. Because nobody could pedal my bicycle for me. The 10 years that I put into becoming an Olympian, I was the guy that had to turn the pedals. I didn't have to do it if I didn't want to. But there are consequences to that, and there are just certain rules that are, and you may not like it. That's okay. Nobody has to do anything. But I'm just suggesting that, again, I can say this at my age. I'm 73. And so as a couple of weeks ago, I was so sad because the day before I turned 73, I heard on the news that the life expectancy for an American male was now 73. So I guess I'm on borrowed time right now. So, on the borrowed time side of it, from my vantage point, what's really important is that, at the end of the day, that we walk off the field knowing that there's nothing more we could have possibly done in life, and if we've done that and we can say that, then nobody can expect anything more from us, not even ourselves. We've done a really good job at life with all the challenges and mistakes that we make because we're all human. That's a really important side to this. And I just feel like people need to be bold. They need to be able to step into it. They need to be, in a certain sense, I'm not going to say fearless, it's not the right word, but they need to show a certain level of verve to be able to take charge and initiate things without being fearful about what the outcome may be. Because it paralyzes people, and I just feel like there's a time for boldness where we be able to step into that which we can manifest and leave for other people. That's why receptivity and restraint are probably the two most important words. at least in my vocabulary, because if we can't restrain ourselves against our survival impulses to get first dibs at our life, then it's not possible to move forward. And that's a biology that's hardwired into us. We did not ask for it. It's just part of our human package, and if we can't stay in receivership to be able to have our unique gifts present themselves to us, then, as you said, Dr. Vu, that we run a risk of spending our life trying to perform at the level of expectations that people have for us. And that's always hollow. It never delivers on the promise of tranquility of being or life value.
Wow. This was a brilliant conversation. We thank you for your time and wisdom. And for the people who are listening, I hope you take away a few points and re-listen to this podcast. In it, I think there's a profound truth in understanding the two mentalities, the mentality of the survivor and the mentality of the seeker. And as you draft your bucket list and living through life, maybe question yourself, are these things that you have written down coming from your survivor-based mentality, or are they coming from a place of true knowing? And I think the more you could recognize and be and follow your being with the actions of that energetic being that is knowing, you'll probably find, like much of Jeff's clients and the people that he's worked with in the past, to accelerate the potential and basically ride the wave of enormous potential that life has to offer each and every one of us. Before I let you go, I have a very last question. And, I don't want you to use the word receivership as an answer, but for everything that you've done in life, for what you know now, what has been your best medicine?
My best medicine was the adoption of my daughter at the age of 10 from Colombia.
Wow.
By far the most important thing that I've ever done, because I think in this world that I think is a bit upside down, like right now, I think you have to wonder, does anybody care about anything? Mm-hmm. And I could tell you, adopting my daughter that was betrayed by her family, her friends, her country. She's Colombian, beaten up and and worse since the age of 4. We adopted her when she was 10. She didn't ask for that. People that showed up differently for her, she wouldn't have the stuff that she has to deal with like right now. And we need to decide every day how we're going to show up for other people. That's really important, because when we adopted her, she jumped up on me. She wrapped her legs around me, buried her head in my chest, and she'd never been hugged before. She only got beaten up and worse. That's all she knew. And she hung on my every word, and for me, I feel like my daughter, I can't imagine living life without having been her dad, because what it taught me was essential. It taught me that you can love anybody. You don't need a special reason. You just do it. It's not a two-way street. It could be a one-way street. You don't do it to get something in return. I also learned that what's important is that you trust the process. Sometimes that's all we got. We have no visibility. We trust the process. Well, how do we get that? Well, again, we let the good stuff show up by not trying to chase everything out of fear. Mm-hmm. Third thing I learned is that, there's always enough energy to get anything done on behalf of other people. When you answer the calling like we did, knowing that my wife cried every day for 9 years and 10 months raising my daughter, it was so difficult. We stayed in the game. We always had enough energy for her, man, because we knew that we wanted to express a potential, not just save a life. It also, I learned, you have to decide how you're going to show up. Every day we can show up and demonstrate for people that there are alternative ways of doing things. And for me, that's extremely important, because the person that says that's just me, the overreactive person that flies off the handle at any provocation whatsoever, that's lost making impulsive decisions, that's not the real them. That's not the seeker. That's because the survivor side was calling the shots. And finally, what I learned from my daughter, most importantly, you never discount the possibility of a miracle, because she was able to overcome every one of the challenges that she faced. It wasn't us and our cleverness. It was that we were able to, petition for the right things to be done on her behalf, and we showed up as good stewards to be able to apply that. So a long-winded way of answering the question, but that's what I would say.
Thank you so much. And I just wanted to, add one final note. When we give, particularly when we give unselfishly to others, we are sending our whole consciousness a very important message that we are actually safe. We have more than enough, that we are connected. Mm-hmm. And that does something very powerful. It quiets down that fear and survival mode, right? It turns that off when you know you've got enough. Brother, I got goosebumps talking to you today, and I can't wait. We live so close together to spend some time in real life. I'm super excited about that. But thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today on the Thrive State podcast. My brother, I know you got to go. Thank you so much.
All right. Big love. Thanks, everybody.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Thrive State podcast. And if you're finding that this content is really helping you and your family members, please consider supporting our mission and our cause of elevating health, happiness, and human potential for people all over the world. You can do so by making sure that you subscribe to this podcast, sharing it with your friends and family members, and leaving us a 5-star review wherever podcasts are heard. All these things are going to really help elevate the show and to give us the resources to continue to bring more content just like this to yourself as well as the people that you love. If you haven't already, you might want to consider joining our community. We actually have a community where people get to engage with me in group sessions where we do breathwork, meditation, where we do challenges together, really to be able to get us access to health, happiness, human potential, so that we could have longevity and performance in our life as well. You can check out our community at mythrivestate.com. That's mythrivestate.com. And if you haven't already, pick up a copy of my book, Thrive State. It really gives you all the tools, the pillars that you need to create a blueprint to control the energetics of your life. Who are you? How you show up in the world? The choices that you consistently make create an energy in your body, and you can control this. And when you can control that, you also control the messages you give to your DNA that gives you access, again, to optimal health, longevity, and peak performance. And let me also just share a free gift to you. If you haven't already, please pick up my longevity and performance bundle where I share lecture notes, ebooks, breathwork exercises, and longevity and performance resources at thrivestatestarter.com. Thank you so much for being a part of this community. Thank you for helping us grow. Remember always, my friends, that you are your best medicine.